Welcome to Decentralized News, where we report the major events affecting the crypto economy. I'm your host, Piter, joined as always by Aussie. Let's jump right into our educational and entertaining content that is not financial advice. In today's show, we're going to report on important updates in the macro economy. The Hong Kong spot ETF and ETH ETF launched this week. There's some new institutional adoption revelations and also new disclosures about how the SEC is trying to regulate ETH. And in the Altcoin Speed Run, we discussed the long list of token unlocks slated for March. Open up BTC.
Not March, for May.
April, May. Yeah, you're right. Excuse me. For May. My apologies. BTC is down. What's going on with the market? What could bring it back up? What are your thoughts?
BTC is down, that's for sure. We're down about, 7,000, 8,000 from all-time highs, 70K area, sitting around 62 right now, so about 10K. I think there's a lot of things that are impacting Bitcoin right now. We had the halving, and so the market always cools off a little bit post-halving. We've also got the fact that in reality, the macro has not been very pretty. We'll talk about it this week, looking at some of the macro impacts, and I think that's just not been a good look for Bitcoin or the market. And then we're also starting to head into that summer lull a little bit early, but not totally out of question. We often have this sort of pullback. It's healthy, and if you look at the chart on TradingView, the weekly chart, we've been pretty green for a long time now. And so we're just getting those first few weeks, 4 weeks now of red. And I think that's necessary if we're going to be moving up for months to come for the next 2 years. If you look at the last market, there was a nice breaking the peak. We pulled back, although only for a few weeks, and then rocketed up before pulling back again and staying down, back at that $30,000 range for almost 3 months. So before we really bounced up. So it's not out of the question for us to maybe spend a few months down before we go press for 120 or more $1,000.
There's also the news that BlackRock ETF hasn't been growing for 3 days in a row. So that finally came to a halt, where they're taking in new inflows all the time. And then also Asian markets have been down. So Bitcoin was up Sunday, and then Asian markets opened on Monday, and for 11 days in a row, they've been down. There is some uncertainty in the market with the Japanese yen. I am not really too keen on the currency markets, but just some shakeup in macro, making it just even more unpredictable about what's going on. Is there a black swan event on the horizon? Speaking of Asia, the big story, and maybe more bullish, is the Hong Kong spot ETFs that are to debut tomorrow. Hong Kong is poised to launch spot trading for Bitcoin and Ether ETFs. These products will differentiate themselves from the US products in that they will be in kind, meaning that when the ETF is created, they provide issuers with funds using actual cryptocurrency like Bitcoin and ETH, while the US products are settled in cash, meaning the intermediaries aren't allowed to touch Bitcoin. So a difference there. And to my knowledge, this is the first spot ETH ETF, although Canada has had an internationally available ETH futures ETF since April 2021. Thank you. It appears access to mainland China will be denied unless they also have an address in Hong Kong. So maybe a little bit of a loophole there. There is a wide range of speculations about what's going to happen, with some arguing for very muted, no big deal, nothing to see here. But I saw an interesting tweet from Willy Woo. They cited the 2022 Hoiby reports.
Yeah.
Their user count, not necessarily the money involved, but the user count is bigger than US and European markets combined. And then according to Zhu Haokang, head of digital asset management and family wealth, China Asset Management, the trading volume of Hong Kong's virtual asset ETF is set to surpass that of the United States opening day. The inflows volume
was about 125 million for
spot
ETF.
Expecting to beat that. So I was surprised to see that headline, but big news.
Yeah, it's big news. We'll see how big of a news it is. I do like the fact that they are settling in kind. It's kind of a better way, an easier way for more people to get access to Bitcoin and ETH. So very interesting in that sense. And I also think that whether the user count is bigger, that's interesting if you consider the population of India and many other nations around there. There's a lot more users, but generally, if you think about it, a lot of the users don't necessarily have access to large numbers of funds. But it will be interesting if people, especially in mainland China, use the Hong Kong address loophole, fake Hong Kong addresses to get access to these ETFs. Might be one way so that they can get access to the broader market. Definitely could be something that helps a turnaround. We'll see.
This is a big milestone in terms of institutional investments and access. So exciting. We'll see how it all plays out coming soon, starting really when this airs. But that's not the only. There's also some other adoption news. Melon, which is the world's largest custodian bank and the oldest bank in the United States, just disclosed that they are exposed to Bitcoin ETF investments. According to a recent SEC filing from BNY Mellon, it was revealed that the bank is exposed to BlackRock and Grayscale Bitcoin ETF. This is a huge bank that have over $2 trillion under management.
That is massive for a bank to be disclosing those interests, and especially one that manages $2 trillion. That's a pretty big step and shows that the ETFs are getting that institutional adoption at a high level within the US. And maybe we see more banks, especially after another bank just declared bankruptcy, First Republic, whether we see more banks hedge their bets against the US dollar with some ETF exposures. So this is quite a good news, I'd say. Even though the prices are down, doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't good news out there and that there isn't something that's going to help bring us out of this down period, at least.
Yeah, it's definitely a nice stamp of approval and could lead to a domino effect with other banks. This is a very large bank, very prominent. Another interesting story that I saw that kind of shows institutional adoption, but a nationally acclaimed meat and seafood company, Beck and Bulo, adopt Bitcoin as a treasury reserve asset. So maybe we're going to see more and more of this going forward.
Yeah, they're joining a not very large list, but a growing list of companies that are holding Bitcoin as a reserve asset and potentially being joined by the country of Switzerland as well. So I think this is something definitely worth watching, especially as we also look at where ETH is going. ETH is pretty interesting, although there is a bit of FUD going on with the ETFs. If any of you have heard of the DCC, we've been struggling with that all morning. They basically are where different new ETFs are listed. Names, at least, are booked. But they've also said that they are going to assign no collateral value to any of the crypto ETFs or other investment vehicles that include Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies as the underlying investment, and will be subject to a 100% haircut. So if any of you are familiar with 401k loans or IRA loans, you can basically take a loan against your assets at a haircut value. So let's say you've got $200,000 in your Roth IRA. You might be, depending on the haircut value, you might be able to get 60% of that. If you're holding for the Bitcoin ETF in your 401k or your IRA, you won't be able to you'll get a $0 loan against that. And so this is maybe one of the things that I was worried about and does put a damper on a video I've put out previously about how the ETFs are actually a great tax strategy and a great way to be able to take profit without actually having to sell your Bitcoin. So now that you can't take a loan against your ETF value holdings, you now have to sell it to really capture any gains or access that liquidity. And so it is a little bit of a downer for especially the ultra wealthy who like using this strategy, but anyone who's trying to use this strategy to minimize their tax implications.
Well, you bring up a good point, because one of the negatives of the whole ETF narrative was that it was making people lazy by learning about self-custody and why that is such a wonderful thing. So your comment about the ultra wealthy, so they're going to want to potentially leverage it. So maybe it brings more value to learning how to self-custody your own Bitcoin.
Maybe if we see DeFi protocols continue to exist, then that might be allow them to use that leverage. Then yes, I think that will definitely be a strategy that comes up. But it definitely does hurt anyone looking to avoid taxes or minimize their taxes, not necessarily avoid taxes through the 401k loan strategy, because I do think that's a powerful one for anyone who is taking advantage of the massive gains in this market.
We can shift over to a little bit of ETH news. Their gas fees are at 6-month lows, and some are saying this could signal a sooner than expected alt season, but that is purely speculation. But the facts are gas is very low on ETH right now.
Yeah, they've been dipping regularly for the last, I'd say, 2 or 3 weeks. All of the professional airdrop farmers that I run with have been taking advantage, especially during Asian markets. Asian markets seem to be where it dumps the lowest, but we're also seeing it other times. It's been surprising. There's been a few times during the American markets that it's also dipped at decent levels. And I don't think it has anything to do with the upcoming alt season. I think it has to show just there's a slowing down of activity. I do think that some of what's going on is there isn't anything super, super exciting going on chain right now. There's massive airdrops that I'm farming, but not a lot of people aren't doing that. They don't have the energy, the patience to do that. You've got some meme coins on base, but because they're happening on base, that doesn't necessarily clog the main chain nearly as much. And really, I don't see there being that many very cool projects right now. And I think that might just have to do with where we are in the cycle right now, where it's 2024. We're just post-halving. We're still super early. Major retail isn't in the space yet. And we got a lot of kind of pre-halving excitement. And I think it was amplified this time around because there's more people in the market. But we got to expect a cool off, and people and the market needs to cool off so that we can get some of that more big upward movement.
We definitely do see summer lulls, and we also see lulls after the halving, so it wouldn't be that much of a shocker. I wonder if it says something about just the airdrop season in general, if the narrative around that is dying off, if transaction fees, because it seems like that's one thing you got to do to get involved with airdrops is to make transactions.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say it's fully cooling off, but it is cooling off. A lot of tier 1 airdrops there's not a lot of new wallets being created. A lot of main airdrop farmers, professional airdrop farmers are hitting maintenance mode on most of their wallets for these tier 1 airdrops. And so that's definitely having an impact. And there's just not been a lot of new super interesting airdrops. Scroll, which was one that I was very excited about, released their Mark system, which is basically like Linea LX, and killed a lot of interest because most airdrop farmers aren't interested in point systems. They think it's generally dumb and lazy. Interesting. I think it's the season too. A lot of people are running out of liquidity. Everyone was buying that shitcoin or the other one thinking, oh, we're just going straight into the right. And we're not having that. And so everyone's run out of money to DCA.
Well, I think the other major narratives driving a potential altcoin season is the Fed eventually pivoting, which we'll get into, but also what's going to happen with this ETH ETF in the United States. So growing sentiment that it's not going to get approved. But there was an interesting story about ETH and the SEC. The SEC, it recently came out in a coin census complaint. The SEC considers Ethereum a security, or it has since 2023. So this is in the face of the fact, as recently as last month, the SEC chair Gary Gensler has refused to clarify whether he thinks the agency thinks ETH is a security or a commodity. The SEC has internally considered Ethereum to be a security for over a year, according to the lawsuit. Let's see. Here are the details. Per coin census complaint, the commission.
It's consensus. It's
I'm sorry.
Consensus's complaint, Gerber Gruwal, which is the commission's director of the Division of Enforcement, so the one who sues everybody. So technically not all of the SEC is responsible for suing, but it's Gerber Gruwal's Division of Enforcement that's responsible for all of the suing, issued an internal formal order. So basically, hey, this is our policy, on March 28th of 2023, announcing an investigation into Ethereum 2.0 and authorizing employees and of the regulator to investigate and subpoena parties involved in the buying and selling of Ethereum. This order, which Consensus says was approved by the commission on April 13th, so just over a year ago, explicitly refers to Ethereum as a security in and of itself, as it is authorized the investigation of certain securities, including but not limited to ETH, as to which no registration statement was or is in effect, and for which no exception was or is available. So one thing is it does point to Ethereum 2.0, so the move to proof of stake, which is interesting. For Bitcoin maxis, that's very bullish news. But this is also another crypto company joining the fight. Consensus is the maker of the MetaMask wallet. They are also responsible for Linea Chain, as well as some other products that are out there. They are suing the SEC for this, for basically keeping this a secret and not providing regulatory clarity. And so this is a very interesting position, because we've also got the SEC considering ETH applications for spot ETFs right now, with a deadline of less than a month from now. So pretty messy right now.
Yeah, there's a lot around this speculation. And while there's growing sentiment that it's not going to get approved, there's still, we can point to BlackRock's record. We can point to this Franklin Templeton news on the DTC that it's still possible. And there is a road there.
Yeah, I think I've talked about a road through a lawsuit. And I think this might be the lawsuit. Whether it's everyone joins Consensus's lawsuit as co-complainants or they start their own lawsuit over this, I think the ETH status as security is paramount to whether or not we get an ETF, a spot ETF. And so if the SEC is choosing to keep its tongue tied and hide behind Gary Gensler's fake position when they're obviously operating on another one, is pretty interesting, especially considering we haven't heard anything about comments for these applications up until now.
It's one of the bad sides of the story, is this lack of requests for comments, stuff like that. Man, wouldn't it be exciting to see BlackRock get denied and then have BlackRock suing the SEC? That sounds fun.
I mean, it could happen. I think this is one of those things that if the SEC decides to dig their heels in, could really spur a big fight. With Grayscale, they got rejected for no real reason, and that spurred quite a fight. And when Grayscale is a pretty big company, but compared to BlackRock or Fidelity or Franklin Templeton, they're not that big. And if those dogs join the fight, then I think Gary Gensler and the SEC is going to be running scared. They really don't stand much of a chance. And you made mention of this, the DTCC, which we talked about just earlier. They are now displaying the Franklin Templeton spot Ethereum ETF on their website. This doesn't necessarily mean that they've been approved. It doesn't mean anything other than they've filed for a name. And this is big because this did happen prior to the launch of the big spot ETFs, and is one of those steps in a row of many. So
they wouldn't do it if there was zero chance.
Yeah, they wouldn't be doing this if there was zero chance. And this doesn't necessarily mean that the DTC has approved their request for the name, but at the very least, it's filed. They're going through the motion, so they at least still believe that there's a chance. And so we'll wait and see if we see something from BlackRock, Fidelity, or other applicants soon.
That being a hyped up story, these TC listings when Bitcoin ETF was coming out. Yeah, let's jump into micro. Big news this week. The GDP missed kind of hard. Its projection was supposed to be 2.2%. Came in at 1.6%. So a pretty big miss. And that's also down from Q4 2023 of 3.4%. So it is shrinking right now.
Yeah, that's a pretty big miss. That's not a little miss, that's a big miss. To be off by 0.6% and essentially at less than half of what was reported in the last quarter. That's not good news, and definitely something that the Fed would be watching if they're looking at a cut. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're getting one now, but it could be a factor that starts piling up and tells the Fed that they do need to cut.
Pressure, but it's in the face of kind of the inflation numbers that came out this week too. They weren't as hot, but they weren't overall like super positive either.
No, the PCE numbers were slightly hot. Some of it was flat or near projections, but year over year PCE inflation went from 2.5 to 2.7%, which was just above 2.6, which was the projection. So not great, not terrible. It is closer to the 2% compared to the 3 or 4% that we're seeing on CPI and PPI, but it's still not great. We're watching how the Fed reacts with a Fed meeting coming literally in just a few days on Thursday, I believe. So
Wednesday is the meeting, and then there is unemployment numbers right after on Thursday. But yeah, it's coming. The market's like 97%, no change. But yeah, there's increased pressure with this GDP miss. That's for sure.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the unemployment numbers come in. We're still seeing a pretty strong position from the market that now through essentially July, there's no chance of a cut, with over 50%, just about 60% possibility that we start seeing a cut in September. It's been, at one point, there was essentially an expectation of almost no cut this year. That's how far the expectations got. But we're now looking at an expectation of 1 to 2 cuts this year, more likely than not. But looks like potentially only starting in September, potentially terminating with 1 cut in December as well. So
I'm excited to see how the market thinks after a Fed meeting and some unemployment numbers this week. But yeah, it definitely seems a little bit of change in sentiment. It was just getting pushed further and further out when a cut was going to go, but now it seems like it's no change, higher conviction for no change for the next couple of meetings, and then I don't know. Whereas before it kept pushing it out further and further, but it's just like, can the economy hold up? Seems to be a question there.
Yeah, it definitely feels like this summer's housing market might be slow again, because it doesn't look like they are expecting to make a cut this summer. If you're lucky, we're talking September right now. If you're unlucky, we're talking November and December for potential cuts. So
squeak it in this year.
Exactly. So September, squeak it in just before the election, maybe. But
yeah, it feels like the closer we get to the election, the less that prediction seems relevant. You know, how much impact is it going to have right before the election? I don't know.
Yeah,
and there was a lot of talk about, the election, they're going to cut. Not an election, but that narrative isn't really playing out.
Not at all. But what is playing out is a huge list on this week's speed run, looking first at a massive list of unlocks. So inflation hitting crypto pretty hardcore, with SUI in a league of its own, and then a few other notable unlocks from AVA, ETH, and Meme. So
yeah, we're gonna post it here on the video. You can see it's a ton, but yeah, the SUI one stands out. It is almost 9%, it's around 8% of their total supply, but 63% of the market cap. Am I reading that right?
Yep, you're reading that.
Huge unlock. I mean, yeah,
it has to do with the fact that they didn't have a lot of tokens on launch, and so you're
struggling. Maybe this is priced in already with the pressure on altcoins already. This is just more on SUI.
Yeah, May 3rd for that potential, that unlock, and then we got some PITH is later down in the month on May 20th. AVAX is May 22nd. Their middle end of May does not look particularly good for altcoins, essentially from May 12th through really the end of the month, with a lot of unlocks, including ARB, Axelar, AltLayer, Uniswap. Starknet,
There's some big names in there. Yeah.
Say, Manta. You've got Immutable X. You've really got everyone and everything under the sun having unlocks in this month of May. And considering an already weak Bitcoin market right now, doesn't look great for some of these altcoins right now. But let's look at one thing that might be good for the market is Coinbase. They're revealing their Q1 earnings on May 2nd, and we're expecting a pretty massive increase in earnings. What do you think?
I'd love to see it. This is a way to get into altcoins in the U.S. market legitimately on the stock market. So a fun play for people. They were brutalized in the bear market. So those that took the risk and chose to invest, Coinbase has been looking good. They got revenue from their base network. I think I saw something like 60 million. I'm not sure if it's in the quarter or the year or something, but some revenue expected there.
And then the fact that they're operating all the ETFs as their security custodian, that should be a massive boost because that launched in Q1 as well.
All right, we got a warning for you Rollbit investors, especially if you're on Solana. You need to migrate your Rollbit or maybe just sell it from Solana to Ethereum before May 1st. So coming soon to avoid losing your coins. So don't say we didn't warn you. But yeah, that's a bummer. That happened fast. I just saw that. I have a little bit on there too. I'm glad I saw this, but some people are going to be pissed, I think. This happened in a very short period of time.
You've got to be, in this market, you've really got to be on the know so that you know what's going on. That being said, Renzo protocol is launching on April 30th. So this video comes out with 7% of their token supply going out in this first airdrop. With that being said, EigenLayer has also just announced their checker for their airdrop. Go check it out. The official links are on their Twitter page, so go look that out. Be warned, it is very heavily geo-blocked. So if you're in the US or Canada, maybe even the UK, you will have some problems, and VPNs and proxies don't work. So if you got a friend outside the US who can maybe just use your wallet, paste your wallet address for you, it looks to be pretty heavily farmed and not a big airdrop for anybody, at least from what we can see right now. To wrap it up, we've also got Camino, which is one of the leading lending and borrowing platforms on Solana, releasing their token on the 30th as well. And
yeah, your favorite dude.
Oh,
Donald.
God. Yeah.
He's got an ordinal apparently. I didn't look too much into this, but he's gonna probably his mugshot is gonna be on the Bitcoin blockchain forever. They're gonna find a way to make it illegal now. You just watch. But yeah, maybe I won't go too much into that. But Injective also in the news here. There is an Injective 3.0 proposal that is live on mainnet now, which wants to decrease injective deflation by 400%. And it looks like it's going to go through. We'll see what happens with that. But everyone, thank you very much for joining us. Please remember, not financial advice. Do your own research. We are here for educational entertainment purposes only. Please do like and subscribe, and feel free to leave your comments about the market. We'd love to see it.
Yeah. Share your thoughts, and thanks for watching, everybody. See you guys next week.